Well, since we have enough people, let's go ahead and call this meeting of the Future-Oriented Approach to Residential Development Task Force to order. First item on the agenda, well, it's called to order. Second item is citizens' appearance. Do we have anyone signed up to make a citizens' appearance? Or in our fabulous booth at City Hall? No? All right, great. Moving on to agenda item number 3. Consider approval of the January 13th, 2021 Foard Task Force minutes. Those were attached to the agenda for today. Did everyone have a chance to read them?
I did, and Bart, I've got a question. So on the part where it says number 7, that the task force discussed the senior housing matrix and removed items of the list that were not viable for the city of Coppell. I think we should list the items we removed, but if I remember correctly, we decided not to remove any items. But
yeah, I think that's correct. I think you're correct.
So number 7 needs to be amended, but I'm not sure how.
I would just say we discussed the senior housing matrix, since we didn't take any definitive action one way or another.
Yeah, we didn't take anything off. I know that.
Also, I know that Maria was late onto the call last time, but I also thought I recalled seeing Danielle on there. Did I completely make that up?
We were both on, and we're both on today too. Yeah, we were both on there. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm sorry, I had problems getting on. But yeah, in the minutes, it was Daniela and I. Mm-hmm. And today again, but we're using my phone because we're having problems with internet.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So change to number 7 just to say we discussed the matrix, and note Danielle as being present. Were there any other alterations or changes to be made to last meeting's minutes?
That was the only thing I saw.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments on that? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes with those noted changes being made?
I move to approve the minutes with those 2 changes made.
Yeah, I second it. Maria Bocalandro.
Okay. All in favor? I guess say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. I heard none opposed, so the motion carries. Scrolling back up to today's agenda. Okay, agenda item number 4, plan and discuss presentation to City Council regarding short-term solutions on senior housing. Mindy, can you remind me what date we're targeting for a City Council presentation?
Yes, that was in new business, so I'll cover that right now. Right now, you're scheduled for March 23rd, and that'll be during their work session.
Okay.
So that gives you this meeting and the in March meeting. As y'all talk about the plan, you do your subgroup based on the notes, and then y'all can come back and present it to the whole group at the March meeting so that you can finalize it before Bart, you'll present it on March 23rd.
Okay. So yeah, in prior meetings we had discussed some short-term potential short-term ideas we wanted to bring in front of the City Council for their consideration. And in order to do that, I was thinking the best way to get a presentation pulled together would be to request 2 or 3 volunteers who wanted to form a subgroup with me. I'd be doing the presentation, but to form a subgroup to help me put the presentation together. Maybe I can do a practice run or 2, and then we of course bring it back to the group in our regular March meeting, and we do a run through with the full committee or the full board here, and then I take it to the City Council meeting. Does anyone have any alternative ideas of how that should work? Or
well, I think we have to worry about avoiding the whole quorum thing, right? So if we think about the items we were going to possibly bring forward, one is related to the presentation Mindy's going to give tonight, which are incentives that might be used to help incentivize home alterations and things like that. And the second was the villages concept. And so I think it would be good if, let's say, because Peggy was most involved in the villages, I helped a little bit with that, that she and maybe one of the, maybe Yvonne or somebody, and one of the new folks, and I guess the alternates can join in, right, if they want to, and they don't count as a quorum.
Well, so, I guess I think when you mention a quorum, you're talking about we want to avoid having a quorum meeting outside of a called meeting.
Correct. We can't have four people together.
So if you had four, all we would have to do is you would have to let us know the date and time you're meeting, and we would just have to post it. So if you want more than 3 to participate on the subcommittee, we can do that. You would just need to consider that we have to post it then, and it has to be a meeting that the public can attend. So
right.
That's the thing to think about.
And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And so I think,
But I should say, Russell, I'm sorry. In the absence of regular meetings, if your alternates, if they attend, they would still count towards a quorum.
Okay.
Oh.
You can't have 3 regular members and then the alternates. That they would still count as quorum in the absence of regular voting members.
Gotcha. Okay.
And Russell, I'm not afraid of having Mindy post the meeting, because I don't think anybody really looks at our meetings. We've had no people that actually attend and request a citizens thing. I'm not really afraid of that.
Right. I was just trying to allow more casual, I know you and I talked quite a bit when we were doing villages back and forth. We had 3 or 4 calls, and we don't want to have to slow down that process.
No.
And so I was just thinking, if we had 2 little group, one working, if we do decide after tonight to move forward with the incentive side of things, that we have a couple of people working on that with Bart, and then a couple of people working on the other. And I nominate you as the primary with the villages, and somebody else, and we divided up the work that way. It may give Bart twice the conversations, but I think the incentive part is going to be a much lesser part of the presentation ultimately. At least that's the way I'm thinking.
I think you're right. So I think, Russell, you and I should work with Bart on the village, because we did all the research and talked to so many villages out there. We're like the village people, so to speak. And so, yeah, I think you're right. And I think the 2 of us should work with Bart on the village. And Bart, I would like to lend my PowerPoint skills to you.
That's very kind. I do appreciate that.
So I can do all the animations. So when you say something, things pop and glow and and fizzle.
That's one thing I'm very bad at.
And just something to keep in mind on that. If you don't see it much here, but Julian, who is our wonderful assistant on these meetings, he's the one that controls the PowerPoint. And
okay, yeah.
So just be aware, you'll have to. I just want you to be aware of that. So if you want to do it without a PowerPoint, that's an option also. But Julian is wonderful at running it. So if you want a PowerPoint, just be aware you'll have to tell him when to advance the slide.
Yeah, I give it to Julian, and he sees that there's animation there, and he makes it pop and fizzle. He's a pop and fizzler type of guy.
So the current idea being floated is for a couple of small work groups, 2 people to work with me on each concept. One is on the village model, which would be Peggy and Russell working with me. And the other is on tax incentives, which I would ask for two volunteers to help with that as well. And this is probably just going to be 1 or 2. It doesn't have to be a crazy time commitment, by the way. The idea is not to drown anyone in work, because we all have other things to do. Does anyone have an alternate idea of how that should work, or does that sound okay to everyone?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
I would like to say something. So I read through all of Mindy's her the whole scope of the incentives, and most of them had qualifiers of HUD financial limits. And then I looked at those. So I went ahead and looked up the HUD financial limits, and I don't know if anybody else has, but basically they don't match up to the city of Coppell medium income at all, not even close. And so I'm thinking that for some of those programs, if it's based on the HUD income limits, we're like out of luck.
Well, maybe we should curtail that to the next agenda item to go through the discussion first. Was there any other discussions on the work groups idea? Maybe we'll go through the presentation on the tax incentives, and then I'll ask for volunteers for that second work group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other comments before we move on?
Well, I had a question because since we have so many new folks, and it's really for Mindy, because I again, the communication and how to stay legal is sometimes bewildering to me. So once Peggy and I and Bart kind of put together a skeleton of a plan, I think it would be good to distribute that out to the rest of the team prior to the next meeting and let them give individual feedback. How does that work? Is there a way to do that without having to call an official meeting, or?
Yeah, I think you can share a document. So if you put it on the SharePoint site, people then have the freedom to go in and look at it in advance, even make comments. So that is fair to do.
Okay, great.
And you can put a red line version out there that anytime someone updates it, it'll red line it so that you can see and trace those changes.
Okay, excellent.
Nice. Any other comments before we move on to the next agenda item? Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5, discuss potential incentives and grants for aging in place by Yvonne Silva and Mindy Hurley.
So Yvonne, you want me to kick it off?
Yes, please.
Okay. So what I've done on, like I said, I've sent you the spreadsheet in case you want to reference it as we go, but if not, I can kind of talk through. So first and foremost, I wanted to address what the city of Capel is currently providing, because I know that was a question. So above and beyond just the homestead exemption, the city of Capel does offer an over 65 exemption. Now there is one caveat that you must qualify for homestead exemption in order to qualify for the over 65, which basically means you have to be the homeowner, the primary, and it has to be your primary residence. But that is a flat $75,000 exemption over and above homestead exemption. And just so you have the statistics on it, currently we have 2,122 homes out of 12,803 in Coppell that have claimed the over 65 exemption. So just so you have an idea of the number in town. The other thing the city of Coppell currently offers is reduced water rates. Sorry, that was harder to say than I thought. And that is a 10% discount on your water rates. So one thing that, and you do not have to be a homeowner for that. Both renters and homeowners can qualify for that 10% reduction on your water rates. One thing that our finance department does every year is they look at our tax rolls, our property records, compare who is currently getting the over 65 exemption, and then look at the water records. And if there's anybody on the water records that have the over 65 exemption, not applied for the water rate discount, they automatically apply it for them because they just assume maybe they didn't know about the water discount rate. So that's a really great thing a great service I think they provide. The only thing that doesn't do is capture renters over 65 because we wouldn't have the property records for that. So there may be renters out there that are over 65 and not getting the discount because they're not aware of it somehow. I think our finance department has done a good job of marketing that discount, but there could be some out there that have missed that piece. So wanted to make you aware that that's what the city of Coppell is currently doing.
So Mindy, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So on the over $75,000, I've never heard of that before. I knew that as a homeowner, I have an exemption. I got that. So if I was over 65, which I'm not, do I fill out a form with the city of Coppell to say I'm over 65?
No, I believe you apply with the appraisal district because they control our property records. So you'll apply with them, but they know in the city of Capel that they can apply that then.
Okay, and so then basically you take 75 grand off of my house value, so I don't have to pay the city taxes on that 75,000.
Correct.
Okay. Now
or county,
and it's just the city. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Well, it's not the county because
it's not. It's just the cities.
The county gives me a different thing for being over 65, but not the same. So now, how does our city over 65 compare to other cities over 65?
You mean the number or what we're offering?
What we're offering versus what they offer.
You know, I have in here, I believe, you know what? I don't have exemptions from other communities. I don't know that answer, but I could look to see what other cities are doing for over 65 exemptions. I think Plano, if I remember correctly, for Plano, it was either 20% or 40,000. I remember seeing that one, but I couldn't tell you anybody else's.
Because the only reason why I ask about this is because when the campaigns were going on and Wes was running against David something, can't remember him, I was at a debate for them, and David brought up the fact that we don't give over 65 people the amount of discount that other cities do, and that the county does. But I don't know that to be a fact. That was just one of those things when they were racing against each other. But I think it's worth looking into to see if maybe that is a recommendation of ours to up what we give people over 65.
Okay, I will definitely look and I'll do that research and I'll get that answer back to y'all as soon as possible so that you can compare it to what other cities are doing. Because I'm sorry, I did not look at that to see what other cities were offering on exemptions. So yeah, I'll look at that and I'll let you know.
City of Irving, I just looked up City of Irving real quick. It was 35,000. So just a neighbor so that you know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Mindy. Good evening, everybody.
Oh, hello. I'm sorry. I didn't know who was talking.
Yeah, it's Subbu. How is everybody today? I think it would be good to compare.
Oh, you went on mute. I'm sorry.
Okay. No. I just wanted to take my camera off. Okay. So I think it would be best to, like I sent an email, I think, I don't know whether you all saw it. South Lake and comparable cities would be good to do because we always want to be at the cutting edge or leading edge, if you will, in ISD and all that. So I saw that your spreadsheet has something about Louisville and other things, but that is great. They are our neighbors, which definitely we should. But it would be valuable to look at South Lake and one more city.
Flower Mound.
Flower Mound.
We got to look at Flower Mound.
Yeah.
Flower Mound's on there.
Yeah,
Flower Mound's on there.
Flower Mound is in there. Flower Mound is in there. I'm not
South
talking
Lake
about
published is 75,000.
Yeah. So there are some comparable.
So Flower Mound is 75,000.
South Lake published is 75,000.
Oh, South Lake. Okay.
The Highland Park too, I think.
Highland Park. Thank you, Kamesh. Highland Park and a couple of other cities would be good to do. And Yuvan is doing a great job looking at it from the internet, which is really cool. But Mindy, I think it's best to go and get it from the source, from the horse's mouth. Yeah. Thank you.
So South Lake does not offer any incentives for home improvements. So that's why they're not on that spreadsheet. But when I look at homestead exemption, I'll definitely include them in Highland Park. But my assumption is Highland Park doesn't provide any type of incentives for home improvements either. So that's why they're not on the spreadsheet. I did see your email, but that's why they weren't included. So I'm sorry. So before I move on, any other questions or comments?
No.
Okay. Okay, so I went through and I looked at the other communities to see, and the majority of them are not geared towards senior home improvements. The majority of them are just home improvements, and they are either HUD-based or they are requiring typically exterior improvements because it's requiring an increase in appraised value. And the reality is, when people go in and make changes to the interior of their home for, handicap accessible or those different things, most likely that's not going to increase your appraised rate very much. So just be aware that there's really not anything for us to compare to say this is comparable for us because this is what these cities are doing. There were some neat programs out there, and I was talking to Matt earlier about Plano had an education program. So while this is not monetary assistance, they do an education program where they bring in home builders to meet with seniors, disabled, anybody that has different accessibility requirements. And there is a design called Universal Design, and it's really geared towards helping with accessibility for those that have different accessibility standards. So they put on a program, and I think that's a pretty neat thing. Again, that's not necessarily a monetary assistance, but it is some information and guidance. They do a program called Plain O Helpers, and essentially what that is they get volunteers from the community come in and help with minor repairs to homes under different qualifications. So I'll tell you that we have started working on, it's kind of I won't say a name because we don't have a name for it yet, but looking at building a program that's kind of a neighbor to neighbor assistance. Maybe there's one day a year dedicated to volunteers coming out and helping with different things. So we could look at different targets. We could look at maybe our first target is, contacting all of those that have an over 65 exemption and see if there are things they would like help with, and then see if we can recruit volunteers to do those things. So there are a couple of things that, again, we kind of already started the groundwork on that conversation. We have not built the program in its entirety yet, but those were some things that Plano did that I thought were neat that did not require necessarily or did not include a monetary assistance from the city, but there is some assistance in there.
I would definitely tell you that both of those things that you mentioned are part of villages that we have researched. So the parts of villages that we've researched do send people in for minor repairs. Things like putting new batteries into your fire detectors, going up and replacing light bulbs that are high up off the ground that need a ladder, things like that. So Russell and I did a lot of research, and most of the villages do include minor repairs like that as a service from different volunteers. So those two types of things would be more in the village camp than in the grant camp, I guess, if we're calling those two camps.
So yeah, Mindy, who's working on that with the city right now?
Well, it's the community development department, and so we're working on, that's actually kind of one of our work plan items for this year, is kind of creating that program, the guidelines. It probably won't be put into place this year, but really creating how we're going to do that this year so that we could potentially implement it next year.
Okay. And are they going to be working through the senior citizens? Is that kind of the senior citizen centered plan, or is it something just completely separate?
So this is really part of our neighborhood engagement program, really. Okay. And so we would be looking at, it's kind of, there's other cities around that do it, where it's kind of an all-call day where all the volunteers come out and they go out, and typically it's kind of geared, what you see in other cities is cleaning up trash or repairing a fence, or they're really geared towards exterior improvements. but then when Plano has, this program, the Plano Helpers, I was thinking, well, maybe the first year we could target just senior homes. And then the next year it grows and it's senior homes and, other areas of town that need additional attention. And so we're just kind of laying that foundation right now and in designing the program and what it will take to do it. Because there is the reality is there's some liability when someone goes into somebody's home and starts doing things inside their home. So there's a lot of that stuff we still have to work out before we can really kick off any kind of program. So that's what this year's for, is doing that research so that we can get ready to kick it off and implement it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, sure. And then, like I said, really the majority of everything else that you find in there in other communities is HUD-based. So it doesn't provide a lot of help because Peggy's exactly right. Based on income levels in Coppell, we have applied for CDBG funds before, and we very rarely get those based on just basically the median income in Coppell. HUD limits it. I don't want to be doom and gloom, but I think the reality is it might be more of a challenge for us in Coppell to qualify for some of these things. Now, as an individual homeowner, I don't know, maybe there are some that could qualify. But if you just kind of look across the board at what our median income level is in Coppell, it might be a challenge. But that doesn't mean we couldn't research it and really have everything laid out so that if somebody did meet those criteria, they could still apply, so that leads to some of the grants. So kind of like I was talking about, even if we got the community volunteers to come together, Habitat for Humanity sometimes does senior home repair events for senior citizens. And so maybe we could work with Habitat for Humanity to see if we could get them to come out sometime. Again, the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development has the very low income housing repair program, which probably not a ton would qualify for in Coppell, but it's still out there. Medicaid actually has a program also where same thing, they can provide some assistance for needs, but I think it is also income based. So we just need to keep that in mind. Now, on the flip side, when we're talking about incentives, and again, really what we're talking about is incentives for aging in place in your home. It looks like we don't have any other cities to really base anything off of, so we could propose some of ours, so if we wanted to go forward and propose some. And I think that that's a fair thing to do, but I also want us to be realistic in understanding that with budget shortfalls that the city is currently facing, it might be a challenge to get city council to do those right now. Most incentives that we provide for business today, typically you give a little to gain. And so it may be a hard sell, but that doesn't mean that we can't put them together and propose them to council if y'all have ideas in mind that you want to propose. So unfortunately, for whichever group wants to volunteer for this one, probably I just scared everyone away from volunteering from this subcommittee. I think it's going to be more about us coming up with suggestions to take to council rather than really being able to look to other cities on what they've done to kind of piggyback off of. I did put, I have on the spreadsheet some helpful resources. Again, these are really more just for us, not for anyone in town necessarily, but there are some resources, some websites they can go to look about how to pay for aging in place, your home remodeling, how to make choices about what the right senior living option is for different people. I've got the HUD website on there. Let's see, I found a Village to Village Network page that I've included on there just since we were talking about villages. And then a website about universal design. So unfortunately, this is not, I know it's not super helpful information, but I guess it is in helping us understand that there's not a lot of cities that are coming out of pocket right now to give grants or incentives to individuals to make those retrofit their home for aging in place. So Yvonne may have better news. So if she's got some other options and better news for us, I certainly don't want to, like I said, I hate to be doom and gloom. I'm reporting what I found. So Yvonne, I'll let you talk about anything you have or have found.
No,
hey, Mindy, before Yvonne steps in, I have a quick question. What cities did we base did the city of Coppell benchmark and come up with this idea about this Foard committee?
I don't know that.
I'll try to answer that.
Okay.
Future IQ built a representative model of, fairly affluent cities that are having huge demographic changes near major international airports. and I can't remember. I think they have like 20 across the nation. Some in California. There's like one in Houston, the Houston area. Like one in Charlotte area. I can't remember them all, but that was what they modeled the Vision 2040 comparative cities after. So.
And so I'm sorry, I can find out, Subu. I don't know those cities right off the top of my head, but they did take a close look at various factors, similar demographics, both racial, financial, income levels, school districts, similar school districts, and like Russell said, cities that are close to airports. So they were very specific in how they targeted what those cities were that they used. I just don't know what those cities are off the top of my head, but I can find out what those are for you. But my assumption is Foard, the future-oriented approach to residential development, was not based on those cities. It was based on the input from our residents on what they think we need to be focusing on for the vision of Capel for 2040. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it would be valuable to read up on that. What was that input that went into making that decision? Because whatever our citizens said, what was that? Because this looks like a really futuristic, and I'm happy to be working on this futuristic, innovative thing. But somebody came up with this idea, or a group of people did come up with this idea. So it would be good to get insight into that.
So the Vision 2040 plan is out there, and you can see there is a page. We switched to a new website yesterday, actually, but it's still the same content. So you can access all of that information today from the city's website. So I'm happy to send you a link to it also, but if you don't want to wait on a link from me, you can access it from our website today.
I will look it up. Thank you.
Okay.
One thing that I'd like to bring up in Mindy's spreadsheet is that I did some research on two things that popped up that were the same, and that is the home improvement tax rebate program that exists both in Flower Mound and in Richardson, because it's not based on the income of the person. It is based on them making their home more valuable and giving them a tax rebate situation. And so I think that is probably worth looking into for Capel. It doesn't have the HUD income requirements, and it's basically saying that if you invest 20 grand or more in your house on a one-time incentive, the payment would be equal to 10 times the amount of the increase in your tax base based on your pre-construction versus your post-construction value. I think that may be a good thing to look at, because I don't know how expensive it is to make your home, all handicapped ready when you're in a wheelchair or something like that. And it could be that some of the things that you do put in inside the house will add value to your home. And it could be that could be a good thing. I don't know. I think it's worth looking at, but that's the only thing that's not based on income that gives you a tax, it doesn't give you any money back in your pocket, but it gives you some tax money to spend on your taxes next year. And I think that might be worth looking into for that other group.
And I agree. I was going to ask actually what kind of the senior citizen exemption that we get to create. We could do a much smaller one that is like an ADA exemption. I don't really like the whole thing of taking the tax money and then trying to rebate it and having to, somebody appraise the house and figure out all those things. That just seems really convoluted. And I don't think the city right now wants to take money out of their coffers and then pay people back after that process. It's going to cost a lot of money to the bureaucracy around it. But if we could, through the through Matt's group, if they could actually verify that somebody has redone a bathroom to be ADA compliant, or, I don't know to what level they have to invest and what level of ADA compliance they would have to provide. But if they met some benchmarks, they would qualify for an ADA exemption at that point. And that could be for any age, because, I think I looked on our exemption, it also qualifies for folks that are disabled, not just 65 and older. There were like 130 something that were receiving the 65 and older exemption because of disabilities. And so I think that may be a better way to look at it, would be.
So an ongoing exemption, or you're saying a one-time exemption?
Well, I don't know, can the Dallas County allow you to have a one-time exemption? I don't know.
So
I don't think so.
Or the tax credit program. The tax credit, like if somebody came in there and made a group home, which also was in Russell's bailiwick, if somebody came in there and they made all the changes for fire escapes and for fire alarms and everything for a group home, could they then take a before value and an after value and then apply for a tax rebate it gives them tax credits.
Sure. So
it gives them tax credits. They don't get any money. There's no money exchange.
So the way the rebate program is, so I'll give you an example. The way the rebate program in those two other cities happens, they don't have to go out and get an appraisal. It will just be based on what the appraisal district does. And the appraisal district will take, so when you were talking about to confirm that they did an ADA, they have to come apply for a permit to do these changes. The appraisal district gets all of these permit applications, and depending on if they view that as an increase in the value of your home, that's how they can work that into your appraisal. So they would just look at, so if we know that Russell did $25,000 worth of modifications to their home, to his home for, aging in place, we would look at your value in 2020 before you did that, and then your value in 2021 on their tax roll to determine what your appraised value differential is. And so I just did the math for you real quick. So let's say somebody did a $25,000 improvement to their home. You would basically, that would be equivalent to $145 in taxes. And so if you did 10 times that, they would get a rebate of $1,450.
Right.
So
I'm my fear, because thinking about house values and things like that, is that ADA compliance isn't necessarily going to make your house more valuable. it may actually lower the value for some homeowners, but I think the challenge is to find a new exemption, an ADA exemption that's $5,000, $10,000, whatever it might be that the city could live with, that once this home is altered, it qualifies for that. I mean, obviously, if it changes hands, the new owner would then have to go and make sure they were getting that exemption. Or maybe it would just stay on the tax rolls with Dallas County under that exemption. I don't know. But it would be a much smaller amount than the $75,000. And it's how do we find that sweet spot that it says, okay, well, you're going to reduce your taxes by $50 a year or whatever, $100 a year over the life that you're in the home. It's providing something to help offset what it may be as simple as $3,000 to put a ramp in, and you're altering one bathroom for $5,000. You do that, you have, and we have to set those standards. Is it one ADA compliant bathroom, shower with, roll-in shower with wheelchair accessible hallways and ramp in the bedroom? What is it that allows you to get that exemption? And then obviously the permits and our own inspectors would be able to qualify that.
So Russell, I think what we're talking about is a one-time thing. So what Mindy was just describing, if I did that to my house, and then I would one time be able to take away the $1,400 and something for that year that I did that, or the next year when taxes come due. But it's not every year. I wouldn't get that every year.
Well, I don't understand. I guess my point is, once you've altered the home to account for that, it's there. And the bigger issue for the city right now is giving you that 10 times that $100. They don't care about the $100 that would charge you that year, but they don't want to give you that $900 for the future taxes up front. So
but
why?
It's a one-time thing. I think only that 1 year you get that back as a tax exemption, and then after that you have to pay that tax.
So that's what the current programs you see in other cities are proposed as. But I think Russell's on the right track of maybe you're coming up with new ideas to take to council to say, could you live, maybe we propose this instead of paying out of pocket to someone who does it. Could we come up with a creative idea to see if they could live with it? And I don't know the answer. I don't know that they're willing to give any money away right now. I think those are just the things we have to take to them to propose. And I think the creativity, more creative you get, the better.
Well, and Mindy, if you can go to the appraisal district and ask them if there's any way to do a temporary, like 5-year, 10-year exemption, that would be the best of both worlds, right? So there's no money coming into the coffers and then flowing out. It's handled at the district level. And you're not getting the permanency, though I don't see a reason not to have the permanency myself, because if you're taking a house that may lose actual value because, it's not as nice for a family of young kids to move into Coppell, but it's ADA compliant and it's going to allow seniors to live more comfortably, I don't see why that house would lose value, that exemption over time. But that's just my take on it.
Russell, you're right. If we did give it overtime like that, so Mindy, what the question would be is, in our software package in the city of Capel that feeds into Dallas County, that tells them what our tax base is for our houses, is there a way to add a permanent, let's say, what Russell's talking about, a permanent minus $1,400 every year in city taxes to that particular property based on the communication software between the city of Capel and the county when the county sends out the tax notices?
I think, quite honestly, I think it would be an exemption application just like over 65 and Homestead currently is. And so I'll check with the appraisal district to see if there is a way to do a temporary exemption. just so we know that answer. And if the answer is no, it only lives with the person that's applied and gotten it. It's not applied to the home and lives with the home forever.
Which would be like the homestead exemption.
Right. Then that would just have to be a point that we come to realize is the person that spends the money to do that to the home gets to reap the benefit, but the next person may not get to. They still get the advantage of the improvements to the home. So,
right. Yvonne, I've seen your virtual hand up for a bit. Do you want to jump?
No, I'm good. That's all I was going to do was outline the distinction, the difference between a permanent exemption, which makes your home more desirable in terms of targeted property purchase, versus an exemption to assist the aged with their aging in place. They're two very different things and they have conflicting objectives. So perhaps we're just saying that in the context of the village, that we offer or incentivize something there that would be maybe a best practice list, that it gets the biggest bang for their buck as it relates to investing in the modifications. And I know Medicare has a slew of lists like that out there from the research that I did on the grants, as do the grant writers. There's a myriad of them out there that have best practices and how they recommend those modifications, and the lowest like 1% tax loan for 10 to 20 years. So there are options out there that we could probably just include with the villages.
Maria, I see your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to flip the discussion a little bit. What are the benefits for the city of Coppell to have seniors living here? And I see benefits from several areas. First of all, these are citizens that are paying, and this might be more for the school board, but they are paying taxes, very high taxes, that are benefiting not only the city, but the school system. And they're really not using the school system unless, like me, I have a grandbaby that lives with us and eventually will use it, but it's not the normal household. I don't consider my multi-generational home the standard, but we could discuss that some other time. So the benefits for the city are, these are citizens that are not out on the street smoking weed or doing graffiti on the, trash bins of the apartments. These are citizens that pay their utilities. They usually take care of their homes. I mean, it's been the home where they've decided to get old in. So I think we should aim for permanent exemptions, because when the person leaves, they don't leave with all the handles on the shower and the ramps. I mean, it stays in the house. And so if the exemption is permanent, then we're attracting population that is low maintenance in the sense of police security or whatever that is. But on the flip side, this group might need more health support. Maybe an ambulance will go more to a senior house than one with family, which I doubt, because kids get into accidents as well. But I think when we talk about that vision of Capel, and it's a place to live and to get old and to always to have that multi-generational, multiracial, multi-ethnicity, that incentive should stay. So I would like to work with the incentive group. I think the restrictions you're talking about, Mindy, are sometimes as a designer, when they give you so many restrictions, you think you cannot create options, but it might be, thinking out of the box and thinking of incentives. And I'm just going to quote, there's a city called Laon in France, and I think I spoke about that. Well, their trains were the same height as everywhere else. Oh, sorry, this is Grenoble. And so they had a lot of people that went to the hospitals, and they had a lot of seniors. They worked with Jack Alston and they were able to change the technology of the trains to put everything that was on the bottom of the train car to the top. And they were able to do it because that's what the citizens wanted. They wanted to be able to get on that train from the sidewalk and not have to go up steps. So I think there's a lot of, maybe we're looking in the wrong places. Maybe we have to look at Europe and other parts of the world where the population is aging. But I think we should look for an exemption that is permanent. That's my position.
I just want to chime in after hearing Yvonne and Maria both talk. I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion to be had. I hadn't thought about, because I think I was in your camp, Maria, on the permanent exemption status, but it does worry me that if we put a permanent exemption on the home itself, that the buyer who's coming in, they may just want the exemption and they might not be doing it to take advantage of the ADA capabilities. And so I think we need to find a way to allow the person who buys it to reapply for it and qualify. So if they have the need for ADA and they buy, it's one thing if I buy it and I create it because I think my mother-in-law is going to need it, and I do the ADA and I get the exemption because I spent the money. But when we move, let's say my mother-in-law, never actually needs all of the modifications. Well, once we move out and a new family moves in, maybe it's a home, a family with kids. They would never be able, I don't think they should get the exemption and they shouldn't get the break. Does that make sense? I want it to be appeal to seniors so that if a senior comes in and they qualify because they are over 65 or something, you can re-qualify for it. We need to come up, I think, with some sort of standards or some sort of disability standard to get the exemption after you've sold it.
I agree. I agree. It needs to be age and disability standard. You're right, Russell.
So I saw you have your.
Yeah. So guys, I went to the Foard goals and Vision 2040, and there are clearly 4 goals, distinct goals. Some of them may be, not so focused. For example, the first goal talks about establish programs to protect the unique character of the single-family community via assist nodes. The second one is explore refit and refurbishment of older housing stock. So the second one is more focused to me, but the first one seems broad stroke. And the third one, explore new options for 55 plus population that maintain high standard of living while reducing footprint. That seems really broad. And the fourth one is undertake studies to consider optimal future city population. I'm not sure whether that's asking us to provide them with a consulting company that can do that, or we should do that study or not. I'm not sure. But number 2 is clear to me. Number 3 and 1 seems broad stroke. So I think this is our deliverable. If you ask me, these 4 are our deliverables, and we should either split up among ourselves as teams and then come up with ideas on that. I think we keep talking about exemptions based on investments made or exemption based on age. Though that is definitely one aspect of this, but that is just one aspect of this, whether it's a ADA compliant investment or investment based on age. Those are just one aspect. Yes. There are other aspects that the goals are asking about. So I think we need to be focused on these. And then like Maria said, maybe we need to look at outside the US because there are other countries which are having some best practices on this case. In this case, yeah.
So Subu, you're right as to what the 2040 thing says. However, the mayor herself came to our first meeting and told us specifically to concentrate on 55 plus housing. And then the city council and the mayor came up with a list of things they wanted us to concentrate on, and it was 55 plus housing. It was their number one objective. What we are working on is to go back to them after a year of working on their objectives that they narrowed down from this 2040 and said, this is what we want this group to work on specifically for a year. We need to go back to them and say, here's what we came up with after a year of working on what you told us to work on. I get where you're coming from. You're right. The 2040 thing covers
So the problem, Peggy, is there's a two type problem here. If the city has got something on the website which all the citizens of Coppell are reading, which is what I am going by, this Foard is out there, and then you are telling me that Karen Hunt came and gave you guys different directions. That needs to be updated somewhere because citizens of Capel need to know what's going on. That is number one. Number two is, this is news to me because if Mindy is telling me to go and look at 2040, and which is what I'm going, and you are telling me Karen Hunt gave you another direction, I don't see the connect here.
Okay.
Well, we have our overarching goals, and we also have the specific aspects that we were asked to focus on initially. We still have our overarching goals. That's still part of our purview.
Well, the 55
Subu,
already a part of these 4 goals. So the
right. And Subu, 2021 is to focus on those 4 pillars and those 4 goals, and not to be so specific. And because of that, we've actually worked with the city to hire Future IQ, the ones that created the 2040 plan, to do another study that focuses in on those pillars so that we can now dive into those pillars like you're asking to. But that study is not going to begin until I think April or May sometime. And so what the 2020 board is just trying to wrap up the work that we've done so that we can do exactly what you're asking to do. And I think, Mindy's working on that process to make sure that we are going to be able to switch our focus and move forward. Because as you heard from our previous meeting, this is what we're working on right now, and what we've come up with is really our short-term suggestions for the city. It is not our overall suggestion for that third pillar, the 55 older pillar, for the long term. And so everything that we're going to work on together moving forward is going to look at those all 4 pillars and at a longer term perspective. So bear with us. I think after March, we're going to get to do exactly what you're saying. We're just trying to take what we've learned, give some suggestions and things that we think can be applied today to help the seniors moving forward, and hopefully not cost the city too much money, because obviously that's at a premium right now. So
I think we're a bit into the new business realm right now. I do want to circle back real quick, see if Mindy or Yvonne had any other comments or items they wanted to discuss as part of the handout.
Well, and I'll tell you that, I'm sorry, that the spreadsheet was just the research I found. I know Yvonne had more, so that's where I'm sorry. I think we left off with Yvonne sharing what she's found. So,
oops, sorry, Yvonne, please.
Yeah, I think we're okay. In the spirit of closing out the matters that you had initially addressed, I respect the fact that it's difficult to onboard us and bring us into the fold. And quite honestly, you've done a lot of work here, and I think it's probably best for us to kind of just be expeditious in supporting your objectives to get your proposal that you've worked on for the last year out. So I offer you my services, and in the meantime, I will continue to research and just create a matrix that shows what all the potential options are, so that we're casting a future version for the next generation's children that spawn from this. Does that sound fair?
So Yvonne, my question to you is, did you find some programs that
I did,
but that we need to consider for our presentation?
I did.
Okay.
I did, and I really do believe that a lot of it is going to be income-based, which is going to rule out, consistently you find 10 for every one that is income-based, and you'd have to have a lower income. And when you're looking at interest rates and the rates to borrow money, in all honesty, I look at it as a marketer and I think, how would you market to this aging population, and how are we creating an incentive for them to stay here? Okay, because that's what this is about. It's about aging in place. And in all honesty, I'm one of those individuals. I'm fighting with that right now. At my age, I'm 55, and I'm looking at my retirement plan, and I'm trying to figure out what incentives do I have to age in place here and continue with the tax rates that we pay. So I am, of course, interested in what all those things are, but I also look at the resources we have, and we have the best resources available. Your 911 call to your home, so there are a lot of benefits. So I believe it behooves us to find some sort of a permanent solution that does in fact affect the tax base or what a senior pays to remain in the city, some sort of a permanent rebate for that individual based on longevity within the city. So if you've lived here greater than 10 years or whatever that number is going to be, that plus your age, plus a desirable maintenance of the home should equal some sort of a rebate or some sort of consideration. And I searched high and low, Medicare, AARP has a lot of resources out there. Any of the Medicare programs, the federal grants, and CDC grants, for example, with the pandemic, they're all related to income. So I think if we wanted to be cutting edge, knowing we just faced a pandemic, it would be worth it for someone in the city to research a CDC grant. But based upon your experience, I trust that because of the wealth of our city and affluence, we could be rejected on that basis, but I would give it a try nonetheless.
Maybe we need to look at if there are any cities, I don't know, Mindy, maybe if we could look at cities that do give some sort of extra besides the 75 grand, give some sort of extra to longevity in your home plus age, like Yvonne was saying, some formula of longevity at the city plus your age, to give some extra boost to that. Because yeah, you're right. I mean, it's expensive to live in Coppell. However, I mean, when you look at the 55 plus communities, it's expensive to live there too. So I was like, we're in that same boat. We're staying in our house. We're retiring and staying right here. Because it would be the same amount of money no matter where I moved if I moved into a 55 plus community.
You're right. And maintaining your independence and convenience and all that great stuff. Yes.
Right. And the senior center offers a lot of stuff. And if we did a village, it would offer a lot of stuff. So you'd have more amenities. But yes, you're right. Probably need to look at some sort of formula like you were talking about, age plus years.
Okay. Were there any other discussions or comments on the incentives or grants part of our agenda before we move on to new business? Okay.
No, sir. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on to new business, which is agenda item number 6. We had mentioned earlier putting together a group to help me with the tax incentive part of the preparation. Maria had volunteered. Yvonne, were you interested as well? That's great.
Sure.
Okay. Well, that brings us up to the 3 where we don't have to post a meeting. That's helpful. If anyone else is really fired up about this topic and wants to help, you're certainly willing to, or you're certainly able to rather. It's just that'll have a bit more on the paperwork side for us, but that's not a huge issue.
So Bart, I'll help you on the continuity of the PowerPoint presentation for both sides.
Okay, that's great. Okay, do we have any other new business to address today?
I have a couple.
I see Mindy. Hi.
Yeah, sorry. So as we already talked about, but March 23rd is when you're scheduled to present to City Council in work session it is still virtual at this time, so it will be a virtual meeting. If anything changes before then, I'll let you know.
Steve, will we all be able to partake in that meeting so we can watch Bart give his presentation?
Sure. So you can either, Julian, we would just need to include you. I was going to say you could stream it and watch it, but I thought, no, we'll just send you the link. We'll make sure you have the link to be on the meeting. So
we'll just send you a link. It's pretty quick.
Yeah, that's great. So we can just watch it live.
And then the other item is City Council has requested to do some joint meetings. And typically how that works is it's 2 boards and City Council that meet. So they have made their selection on which boards they want to meet together. And so they have selected for Foard to meet with P&Z and City Council. And so we're working on a date right now, so we'll keep you posted on that, but we will have a joint meeting with Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council sometime in the near future. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about was our March meeting then. So my assumption is we'll come back. I think y'all tell me if you're wrong, if I'm wrong, but do y'all want that opportunity so you can come do a run through of the presentation to the entire group so that they can input any ideas? Okay.
Definitely.
A good idea.
Are there any other topics? I know.
Mindy, quick question about the joint meeting.
Uh-huh.
I assume those aren't regular meetings as far as what we would normally discuss. So how do those normally work?
Typically, and we'll find out for sure before, but typically there are specific things. In the past, it's been just kind of updating those groups, things we're working on, or matters that impact both of us. But we'll kind of get an idea of what council wants us to discuss prior to that joint meeting. So we should have an opportunity to find out what that is and to kind of talk about it before we schedule that, before we actually have that meeting, I should say.
Great.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Mindy, were you able to get the developer to come and talk to us, or?
So as I stated in Peggy's email, and nobody responded back, so y'all tell me if you feel differently, but since that was not a short-term option, I decided that we probably shouldn't spend our time at this meeting doing that. So in the meantime, and I'm going to say Sheila, but I just realized maybe I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, Sheila. So tell me if I am, and I apologize. Is it Shelly?
It's Sheila. It's actually spelled wrong on the screen. It's spelled Shelia, but pronounced Sheila. So
okay.
Everyone asks, no worries. No worries.
Okay, when I saw your email the other day, I thought, oh my gosh, I've been saying her name wrong. So, okay, good. So Sheila has connected us with someone. So we have a couple of options and we can bring them both in to talk to us. But like I said, I felt like since that was not part of the short-term solutions that you're taking to council, that it would be better to spend our time talking about what we are taking to council first. So I can certainly bring them to the March meeting if y'all are ready for that. Y'all give me guidance.
So Mindy, I sent you 3 or 4 people too, right? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. We have multiple options. We would probably break them up so that they're not all on the same meeting, so that they're not waiting for somebody else to finish their presentation. But like,
right. So my question to you is this. So, well, here's my concern. When it comes time for us to work with Q and I,
Future IQ.
Future IQ. You know, they're not a total open book, guys. They're not. They have time specific. You know, even for their focus groups, you've got only so many questions you can ask, only so many opinions you can get to, and stuff like that. We're going to have to bear down on what we really want to know. The developers, my point in the developers are really needing to know is every developer so far that we've asked and gotten answers from has given us parameters that we can't meet. In other words, 75 acres, 22 acres for the last 55 high rise that I talked to. So we've gotten these parameters that we can't meet. And so eventually we'll have to make that decision of whether or not we even let Future IQ delve into that, because I see Subu saying, yeah, because why have them go down the rabbit trail and have everyone in Coppell saying, yes, I want a 55 high-rise, when we don't even have the land to make that happen. So that was the only reason for asking about the developers to come, because the more we hear what our parameters are, and the more we compare that to what Matt says, do we have this, Matt? And he says no, or maybe he says yes. Then we'll know where to point Future IQ to.
So the person Sheila sent me is actually a Coppell resident also. So we can absolutely we can have a couple of presenters at the March meeting, and then
Sheila, so Mindy, is Sheila's person, do they have a 55 plus high rise or 55 plus community in North Texas?
Yes, they do. It's not a high rise, it's a community, and they have a couple.
Okay.
I just I understand, Peggy, your point, but that is thinking of bare land. There are areas, maybe, shopping strip malls that are not doing well, maybe some industrial that could be changed. I mean, you're looking at bare land. But then again, yeah, it's the cost associated to that. But a high rise is actually a much more efficient way of using urban space, and it is reducing the footprint, because when we read the goals, it's seniors don't. Yes, it's great to stay in your own house, but maybe your house is too big. Maybe you need a smaller place, and so you could. If the community is like you in the living style, you could live in a high rise with neighbors that go to sleep at 9 a.m. and don't play loud music, So I wouldn't just discard it because there's not 30 acres, available right now, because I mean, a city changes. There's zoning changes all the time. It could be one of the churches. I don't know. I think if we ask Matt, do you have, 70 acres free? He might say no, but are there areas that are being revitalized and they're modifying and asking for zone changes? I see them all the time.
Right.
I do think having sorry, Peggy.
That's what we need to ask the developer. Do you ever go to a church and say, hey, I'd like to buy your church and build a high rise? Or, hey, I'd like to buy your building, and because I think you're going to find that they, unless that business has gone under and they're trying to sell that land at a great discount, I think you're going to find that they're not looking for that, because tear down and repurposing is a lot more expensive at times. But
I think I think if they're being a developer, especially who is a Coppell resident and who works with these types of communities, that sounds like the perfect intersection of someone that understands Coppell but also understands that business model. So that sounds like a great person to come in and talk.
Correct.
Yeah, I would like to hear them too, as we're trying to wrap this up in March and then move on. So while it's still kind of on our minds, let's get as much information as we can, and then with Future IQ's information, we can see where it fits in the overall plan.
Okay, so I will see if I can get him to speak at the March meeting. So we'll have an item for the run through of the presentation. We'll see if he can present at that March meeting. Are there any other topics you want included on the March meeting? And I'm going to continue to send y'all in advance of the meeting kind of the layout, so that way anybody can chime in if they felt the conversation was supposed to go in a different direction, or if you have a different viewpoint. So anything for the March meeting?
No. I was going to ask you, Mindy, if you've had the new people take the Open Records Act training yet. But that's
Yes, we have, everybody has turned in theirs, so yeah.
Okay, so I will be in touch with Peggy and Russell about working on the village presentation, and I'll be in touch with Maria and Yvonne about working on the tax incentives presentation. Yeah. Was there any other new business to bring up? Okay, seeing none, that is the last item of business on our agenda, which means we are officially adjourned. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. See you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.